This is like posing on steroids. This is definitely not just posing a few things. This is posing craziness, madness, whatever you want to call it. My goal is not necessarily to teach you how to pose a few poses. My goal is to teach you how to come up with your own poses that always look good. Because that's going to give you a lot more options, okay? So, first thing I want to do is ask you guys, each and every single one of you, do you remember that 777 chart? Don't even look at it. I want you guys to give me one or two of those 777 things that has to do that if you inject these 21 things to any pose, whether she's sitting, he's standing, or they're together, whatever, it's always going to look good, or most of the time, it's going to look really good. Can you think of one, Fran, or two?
The cross between the eyes, or the
noses.
The noses, that's
yeah,
right.
The
Instead
X
of
factor.
parallel, yeah, the X factor.
The X factor or the noses. Can you explain why? I'm sorry, Fran. Can you explain why that getting the noses not to be facing each other, why crossing the noses is a good idea? Can you explain why?
No.
You can try.
I can look at my notes.
Think about it.
Because I remember something about the parallel lines, and I remember that when they're looking straight at each other, it looks creepy. And
looks what?
It looks creepy. It doesn't look right.
Correct.
I can't remember what else. So.
If you have a person and you tell them, hey, you guys go ahead and look at each other in the eyes, which happens all the time. I see it all the time. Or look at each other. Yeah. Well, look at each other is good in this distance.
Yeah.
But it's not good when you're right here. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you don't look at each other this way. So you turn your face, and by the way, by turning the nose to one direction, one of the faces is going to show better on the camera. It's not just complete profile. I find that showing somebody's just profile, especially with if you're like using a 24-70 or any kind of lens like that, it's going to make their cheek look really big. It's just not an attractive way to put someone. Like if you have the cameras here and the person is here, if you have them turn their cheek just a little towards the camera, at least one of them, you're featuring that person. So it's a perfectly valid photo. One of the two is being featured. Okay, if not both, but one of them is at least being featured. And when you turn their cheek, not only do you cross their nose and it makes the photo more believable, which is the goal at the end of the whole thing, but you also feature someone and it's more flattering on the face because you see part of this and you also see part of the other side of the face, right? Like if I'm looking at Mallory, you just turn your cheek that way all the way through. Like if I just do that, it's just a lot of face. Now if I turn just a tad, now I can see most of this side and a little bit of the other side. It's so much more flattering, right? Okay, good. Pepe, can you think of one or two things that we talked about 777, lucky 7?
Yeah, one of the main things it caught my attention was avoiding the 90-degree angles. And and also the having their spinal straight.
Now, the 90-degree angles, let me just review real quick. That's a challenging one for people. I don't say you never, ever have to have 90-degree angles. 90-degree angles in general are kind of for strong structure. But if you want strong structure, the 90-degree angles are going to work well for you. I say 95% of the time that I'm posing, I try to avoid them. But there are photos where I purposely do it. I purposely have the 90 degree. Like if I put the girl's arm on the guy, depending on the height of the girl to the guy, 90 degrees is your only option. See what I mean? Sometimes 90 degrees is the best option. But that being said, in general, those 90-degree angles on the legs and the wrist all like this is not going to be a successful move for you. So whether you have the person sitting down like we did yesterday, you can go ahead and have them sit. But what I noticed yesterday is when Kizia was sitting, she was sitting too far from him, so she had to actually slouch her spinal cord, started slouching. And all I saw was a slouched spinal cord. That's what I saw. When she was kind of like this, it was slouched. So that's why I told her to sit back up. Remember that? Yeah. Another thing we noticed is we introduced a weird background in the back. Remember that? And try not to introduce any elements in the background that are not part of what you saw. And you saw that the patterns and the repetitions of the grass. Even though I don't like grass photos, it turned out really nice because we did it right. You see? And by the way, I may not like grass photos. I have to take grass photos all the time because people go to locations where there is grass. Grass is everywhere. When I photograph weddings in New England, it's like grass galore. You know what I mean? Yeah. So if you do have to photograph in grass, you have to know how to handle it. And don't introduce any distracting elements. Nikki, do you remember anything from
Posing
those
the
two?
hands
Posing the hands.
can change the photo completely.
Yeah. Good. And more specifically, don't
have all hands in one big mess of hands.
Yeah, and it was the mirroring effect. Remember that?
Oh,
don't
right.
mirror. So if the girl is holding the guy, don't have a mirror of her hands. Have one hand slightly higher than the other. Even if it's like 2 inches higher, it's good enough. If you apply these things to any pose, you're going to have a pretty good chance of a very good looking pose. Okay?
And even the position of the fingers can look more aggressive. It can change the feel of the photo if they're relaxed or
Yeah, you always have to soften the fingers, right? Soften so that you don't go like this or any. Sometimes people like stick out their finger. Like it's kind of weird, you know, when they go like that. You know what I mean? So you just soften the hand. When I say reach out to the back of the head, remember we talked about the armpit, right to the armpit pose. If you tell him to reach out, you tell him reach to his head or reach to his chin, but do it with your elbow needs to stay down, so she reaches this way. Okay, you don't want to do that, right? Okay, Juliana, go ahead.
The focus, light, and size.
Okay, that's really good. That's subject emphasis, which was one of the biggest things we talked about yesterday. Why, Juliana, why was I so strict and so adamant to push subject emphasis?
Well, because that's a make it or break it on a picture.
It's exactly that.
You want to
If
make
you don't
sure
have
that that the elements, your subject's really in focus. And
Right. And what were the three again?
light, focus, and I don't think a size. Is a size?
It is size. Can you explain, when you say light, what does that mean?
Light, you want to make sure that the face is the most lighted thing on the picture.
Good job.
Focus, you want to make sure it's in the focus point.
Good job.
And size, it's like the brightest thing on the picture will be the
biggest, whatever.
subject.
And they don't have to be the biggest, right? But
Right.
it's one technique for subject emphasis. If you have, bless you, if you have a scene and your subjects are like this small, but the scene plays a role in the photograph, like it's like a landscapey wedding photo, that's okay. But when you have somebody small and they're not lit separately from the background, they're just there. It just becomes another element.
Get lost. Yeah.
It could just be another car. You know what I mean? If you were to go to Photoshop, open the photo in Photoshop, and then do a Gaussian blur, a really heavy Gaussian blur, to get rid of all the objects, right? It just leaves the blur and the colors. If you don't see your bride and groom, your model, your fashion shoot, your senior portrait, your baby, your child, whatever you're photographing, if you don't see that stick out when it's all blurry, you did not do subject emphasis through light. I'm going to show you the photos we took yesterday, and they look really fun because we had a lot of challenges and we solved them. You know what I mean? And it turns out really cool, and I'm going to explain some of that as soon as we finish this. Mallory, go ahead and give me one or two things you remember from 777.
I really like the invisible plane.
Oh,
That angle.
Yeah.
I love that.
Gold.
And then like the creepy hand
Yeah, creepy.
thing. That's always.
Creepy hand crawling.
Yeah.
Yes. Explain the invisible plane.
So if you have your camera here, and this is an invisible plane coming from the camera, you want this plane to hit their eyes first, then you'll always get the best angle.
What's an acceptable distance if it doesn't hit the eyes?
4 inches?
Yeah, like between 4 and 6 is about what you want to do. Now, that's like 90-degree angle. Sometimes you can't always achieve that, but you try for it. You try for it every time. If I'm photographing Nikki from here, I don't photograph her from here because I'm going to hit her knee. I won't even photograph her from here because it's still her face is still far back. I would definitely come this way and raise the angle, and then it will hit her face right away. And that's a better angle for her, for anybody, okay? So invisible, plane, gold.
Yeah,
Subject
love that.
emphasis today is gonna be like the go-to thing. If you take a photo today and I don't see size, light or something, I'm gonna say do it again. Okay, because it has to be clean background, and the bride and groom are gonna be the brightest person in the photo, okay? All right, David, my friend, go ahead.
I really
Two
like
things.
the tip you gave us about shooting from the apex of the shadow when shooting outdoors in harsh light. And by shooting from the same direction as the apex of the shadow, you're going to get clean light on the faces of the subject.
Right.
There was that, and then I liked what you taught us about colors in the background, trying to make sure the colors that you have in the background are related. You don't have red, green, and blue, for instance.
So color families are the
Color
same.
families are the same in the background.
And what is the other one?
Shooting from the apex of
that's
the
right.
shadow,
Right.
so that the light falls smoothly on
Right.
the faces of the subjects.
Many of us, and many of you watching online, have to shoot any kind of photo shoot in midday or at 2 in the afternoon, and that's the photo shoot. Most of us freak out and we look for the shady spot. Where is the shade, right? Shade gives you a cold color temperature. It's not good lighting. Shade next to sun, like we talked about at the end yesterday, can bounce that light from the sun back into the shade, gives you the best light, right? But if you're ever in a situation where you're in the open area and you need to take great photos, it's as simple as look at the shadow, stand in the direction of that shadow. You don't have to stand on the shadow. Sometimes people confuse that. If the shadow's 3 feet long, you don't stand 3 feet from your subjects, okay? You can stand 100 feet, but you're in that direction. You're just using the shadow to guide you where the sun is. The sun is obviously casting that shadow, so the sun is now directly behind, and it cleans the whole face to the most beautiful light because that sun is also wrapping around them. Does that make sense? So especially if you use apertures that are pretty shallow, like 2.0 or something like that, it's just going to give you beautiful gold photos. But don't forget the background. Background is key, okay?